All right, here we go. Welcome into Chatterbox Bengals. I am your host, Stone Shields. On the heels of a 31-17 victory for the Cincinnati Bengals last night on Monday Night Football, their first preseason win since 2022. I believe it was 7 consecutive preseason games that they dropped, but they are back on the smiling side of the scoreboard here last night, defeating the Washington Commanders. I get it's a preseason game, but for a team that's really struggled getting out of the chute and starting strong in the regular season, it kind of feels important that Cincinnati ultimately won the game. Shaky start defensively, but Cincinnati does pull away and beat Washington 31-17. Plenty to unpack on today's show. Going to be talking about some good things, talking about some bad things. Also do have something I want to get off my chest at the very beginning of today's show, so stick around. You don't want to miss that. But do invite you guys to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. That's youtube.com/chatterboxsports. We have now surged over the 18K subscriber mark here at the channel. Thanks to you guys. So pat on the back for that. We certainly appreciate it, but plenty of Reds content coming your way. Cincinnati takes game 1 on the road in the West Coast against Anaheim last night, 4-1. Back in action tonight. We will have a pregame show, as we always do here on the channel, and a postgame show with Trace Fowler and Nick Kirby as well. Hunter Green back on the bump for the Cincinnati Reds, going against Kyle Hendricks, a guy that the Reds have had lots of success against in the past. So you don't want to miss that. Cincinnati looking to stay hot and get a second consecutive win here on the road in Anaheim. But let's talk Cincinnati Bengals after the victory last night. Here's what I want to get off of my chest here to begin today's show. Lots of people have been criticizing both Zac Taylor and Joe Burrow. Zac Taylor for, oh my goodness, why is Joe Burrow still in the game? It's the third series. Why is he still out there? Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they're not out there. Why is Burrow still out there? And then people are criticizing Joe Burrow. What's he doing? Running around, fighting for his life, trying to extend the play in a regular season game, and ultimately getting sacked at the 2-yard line. But this is my response to that. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that people are out there criticizing Zac Taylor and Joe Burrow for how things went down last night. There is a reason Joe Burrow is playing in the preseason. The reason that he is playing in the preseason is that hopefully things can be a little bit smoother come week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. An opportunity to work out some kinks that you can't necessarily work out in a training camp practice situation that you can work out in a preseason football game. Was I excited to see 2 guys fall on top of him and him get hit hard a couple of times last night? No. Zac Taylor, of course, pointed that out as well. But if the point for Joe Burrow playing was to go out there and throw some screen passes and immediately get rid of the ball and just turn around and hand it off, run the football, then what's the point of him even playing to begin with? No, the point of him playing is to get real meaningful reps out there on the football field. And yeah, you know, we all held our breath when Joe Burrow was running around and about to get hit, right? But that's what Joe Burrow does. That's what he's going to do in the regular season. And he was testing it out last night, and Zac Taylor alluded to it after the game. He needs to get a feel for that again, right? He needs to, get that experience of how long I can extend this play, what have you. And I think that was a very, very valuable rep for Joe Burrow last night. Was it ideal that he got hit? Absolutely not. But at the end of the day, he comes out healthy, and that really is a positive sign. And Joe Burrow also spoke about the fact that, hey, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, they're great, they're outstanding. We all understand that, but we also understand that they've missed some time throughout their respective NFL careers. It's part of the game. It's part of professional football. These things happen. And Joe Burrow, as the quarterback, hopefully he doesn't miss any time as far as games this season, but there's a real possibility where he's going to have to go out there and throw lots of passes to guys like Charlie Jones, Yoshi, right? Mitchell Tinsley. We'll spend some time talking about him, of course, on today's show as well. Jermaine Burton, perhaps. Backups, guys that aren't your Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, they're going to have to play well for Cincinnati if they want to get to where they want to get to here in 2025. And he stayed out there. He still had his starting offensive line out there for the most part. We'll talk about that as well. But some receivers, his 2 guys, Chase Brown, they didn't need to be out there for more than 1 series. And it was good to see, in my opinion, Joe Burrow stay out there a little bit longer. And I think Zac Taylor stuck to his guns. He said, we're going to play our starters more in the preseason. We're going to play Joe Burrow a little bit more in the preseason. That's exactly what he did. The Bengals got some valuable reps against Philadelphia and last night against Washington. Now, we will see if that worked. Offensively, if they are kind of stuck in the mud against Cleveland in week 1, then you'll be like, okay, maybe it didn't work. But it was time to switch things up, considering how slow the Bengals have started in recent years. They did that this year, and I think Zac Taylor and Joe Burrow should be applauded for that. Again, was it great to see him get hit? No. But the whole point was for him to go out there and play football, and that's exactly what transpired. And I don't get the people that are sitting there saying, oh, after he took that sack, that should be his last preseason snap with Cincinnati Bengals. No. The plan was the first quarter, at least 3 drives, and they put him back out there for drive number 3, marched the ball down the football field, and scored a touchdown. And that allows it to be more of a positive takeaway that you have watching the ones offensively. We'll talk about the ones defensively here in a second. But overall, I think the Bengals, Zac Taylor, Joe Burrow handled this really, really well. We will see if he plays in the third and final preseason game. Joe Burrow basically was like, yeah, I'm open to do it. Might not with a short week coming up. That's ultimately Zach's decision, and we will find out. I'd be surprised if they played him, but for the most part, I think the Bengals really squeezed all they could have out of the preseason to this point as far as their starters going out there and getting some valuable reps. Task completed. You can check that off the box. They did it. We'll see if it translates come week 1 against the Cleveland Browns. All right, let's talk more specifically about some things as it relates to the game itself. The defense. Now, I just backed up Zac Taylor a little bit there. I got to, criticize him a little bit here when you're talking about the defense. Naturally, the beat reporters after the game at the media availability were asking Zac Taylor, like, yo, that's back-to-back games here in the preseason. The ones defensively have basically stunk up the joint. Are you worried about that at all? And Zac Taylor kind of cut him off and was like, no, it's the preseason. We're keeping, what we're doing as far as our disguises, our schemes, all that's kind of close to the chest. And he basically was like, yeah, I'm not concerned at all. We see what they can do for us every single day at practice. They've really given trouble to our offense, and I feel really, really good about where our defense is at. But for us as fans who aren't there throughout all the practices, right, aren't there throughout all the training camp sessions, we're sitting in there looking at the Bengals ones defensively and saying, oh, we're just where we were last year, probably even worse, right? I mean, these drives against Philadelphia, Tanner McKee, and then early on in the game against Washington, just absolute disaster. Covering air from a secondary perspective, not getting anything done in the trenches, linebackers getting beat, just bad all over the place. Really, there's not one player where you could sit there and say, he played well. Maybe you could say that with Dax Hill. It was great to see him out there. He looked like he was moving around pretty well in the football game. But apart from him, everybody really, really struggled in the game, and it's got to be a cause of concern for us. Now, Zac Taylor tried to downplay it, said it's the preseason, says he really likes what they've done in these training camp sessions. But, boy, these first 2 preseason games with the ones have been an absolute disaster. All areas of the defense, linebackers, trenches, secondary guys, and that just absolutely can't happen. Just a play that, sticks in my mind at least is the Jordan Battle. I mean, Jordan Battle is looked at as a guy that's going into year 3 now, where he's, looked at as hopefully a guy that can help stabilize that safety position. He was downright horrendous in this football game, and I'm a big Jordan Battle guy, but it looked like he thought it was the Pro Bowl or something when Jaden Daniels was coming running at him, and he just kind of touched him a little bit and just let him walk into the end zone. No, you're a safety. You're supposed to come up there and lay the wood on Jaden Daniels, despite the fact this is a preseason game. So that really was head-scratching for me. Demetrius Knight Jr., he's a rookie. He's going to start. He's going to be asked to do a lot. Was not his best game as a linebacker for Cincinnati. He got hung up in some blocks, really wasn't able to make some plays, kind of got knocked down a few times as well, so that was certainly a concern for Demetrius Knight Jr., but he's a rookie. He's a young guy. It's going to take some time to develop, and those guys along the defensive line essentially did nothing in that football game either. TJ Slayton, he's going to be looked at as a guy that's kind of a run stopper, can also provide some interior pass rush. He was your big free agent signing. He was good against Philadelphia. I don't think he necessarily did much this past game. And as it relates to the rest of the defensive line, weren't really calling their name early in the football game. Washington, even when Jaden Daniels came out after that first drive, was kind of having their way with Cincinnati. That is concerning for me, but I do understand it's the preseason. If the Bengals defense looks like that week 1 against Cleveland, they're going to have a lot of questions, and it could get really ugly really quickly for this coaching staff and for this defensive personnel. But I'm a little bit more concerned than Zac Taylor is when it comes to the state of the Bengals defense. All right, let's talk about some good things that transpired in the football game last night. As we talked about, the Bengals won the game. It was 31-17, so obviously there were some things that were good that happened on the football field. I think the first thing that pops to mind to me, we'll get to Mitchell Tinsley in a second, but the first thing that pops to mind to me is Dylan Fairchild, third-round rookie out of Georgia. Ever since you drafted him, you've been basically saying, yep, the left guard spot is his. He's got to go out there and earn it, but we're basically giving him that opportunity. He's been terrific through 2 games against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. Actually is graded out per PFF is the highest graded rookie offensive lineman through 2 preseason games. Is PFF the end-all, be-all? No, but I do think that is an intriguing sign. Only has given up 1 pressure, no sacks. He looks really comfortable out there on the left side of the offensive line, flanked by Ted Karras and Orlando Brown Jr. And, I think a lot of us kind of were like, okay, he's definitely going to be the weak link of the offensive line. He's a rookie, right? These things happen. But he's been really solid through 2 preseason games. It looks like the Bengals have something in Dylan Fairchild, and I'm really excited to see him play. But I think really you got to be pleased with what you've seen through a couple of series with Dylan Fairchild out on the football field. Now, the right guard spot, that's a whole different story. I said we were going to talk about positives here, but it is time to probably bring up, Lucas Patrick. He was bad again in this football game. When he left, we all thought it was a benching for Jalen Rivers, your 5th-round pick out of Miami. But there is a clip kind of going around social media. You can kind of see Lucas Patrick grab his pec. And Zac Taylor did say after the game he was banged up there as well. So apparently Lucas Patrick not fully healthy. Maybe that's why he exited the football game and Jalen Rivers came in. But Jalen Rivers was out there playing right guard with Joe Burrow as the quarterback. So that's, not an ideal spot to be with 2 rookies on your offensive line in a preseason game with 9 back there. But, the Bengals have a lot of questions to answer at that right guard spot. We talked about Dalton Risner yesterday. As of filming this video, he has not been signed. There really hasn't been an update on that front. But I think at this point you would love to be able to bring him in and sign him. You have to add somebody to that room, especially if Lucas Patrick is beat up. Mitch Tinsley. Let's continue with some positives here. Mitch Tinsley, I think, made the roster last night. We kind of talked about that 6 wide receiver spot being up for grabs. Kind of felt like Isaiah Williams was a guy that the Bengals liked, trusted, probably was going to get that spot if nobody really popped. But Mitchell Tinsley, boy, is he popping. And the 2 touchdowns that he made, just absolute ridiculous catches. Good balls there from Jake Browning there as well. But right place, the right time. Zac Taylor was saying, he said, baller is what he said when they asked him about Mitchell Tinsley after the football game. And that's kind of the takeaway I had as well. Spent his last year of collegiate football with Penn State. Was actually a part of the Washington Commanders last year leading up to the season. Ultimately was cut. Zac Taylor made him a captain last night. Gave him an opportunity, and boy, he took it. And you could tell, by the way, Joe Burrow really is pleased with Mitchell Tinsley as well. A couple of weeks ago during a Burrow press conference, he brought up Mitchell Tinsley without even being asked about him, so that's certainly a telltale sign. But he told Laura Rutledge on the sideline, hopefully he had done enough to make the roster, and then he also reiterated that after the game at his post-game press conference. Seems like Joe Burrow really wants Mitchell Tinsley to be a part of this team, and how could you not? If that's your wide receiver 6, I mean, the plays he was making last night were freakish type of plays that you see from guys like T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And if he's wide receiver 6 for you, boy, look out. We've already talked about this wide receiver room being the best in the NFL, but if you can have him as your last wide receiver on the roster, based on what he flashed last night, boy, that is absolutely unbelievable. I think fans should really be fired up about Mitchell Tinsley, and at this point, I would be surprised if he does not make the 53-man roster for Cincinnati. Speaking of wide receivers, though, Charlie Jones, he was really good last night. It was good to see Burrow out there throwing some passes to Charlie Jones. The throw in the end zone, the touchdown, was just a gorgeous throw. Best play Burrow made all night. Great route there from Charlie Jones. Great hands there as well. He returned the opening kickoff. I believe it was like a 30-yard return, so that was impressive. The thing about him is just staying healthy, right? He's probably your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 for Cincinnati. He's definitely going to make this roster. It's year 3 for Charlie Jones. He looked really good, and I am excited about him as well. Talked about Jake Browning a little bit. Positive bounce-back game, right? Was it perfect for Browning out there? No, but he certainly improved upon the first game against Philadelphia. Put the offense in the right spots. Kept them, going from a, fluidity perspective, I would say as well. So he took a step in the right direction. We talked about on the show. It was ridiculous to think, consider, insinuate that Desmond Ridder perhaps could take over the backup quarterback spot. That is Jake Browning's, and he proved that last night. A couple of more guys I want to talk about on defense before we get out of here, because there was some promise shown on the defensive side of the football later in the game. Now, a lot of people probably checked out after the ones came out and were just kind of frustrated with that performance, but there were guys that did a good job on the back end. Let's start with the 2 guys that made that had an interception last night. Barrett Carter, 4th-round pick out of Clemson. he really impressed me last night. He had an interception in the football game. He could be a guy. If Logan Wilson / Demetrius Knight Jr. are struggling early, they might have to pivot to a guy like Barrett Carter to be out there with the ones. Is he at that point yet? No, but he definitely flashed some good things with the ball skills there, and he's definitely going to be a guy that Darren Simmons leans on heavily in the special teams department. But as far as a draft pick perspective goes, I think you had to feel pretty good where you're at with Cincinnati with your 6 guys that you drafted this past NFL draft. And I think right there at the top of the list there is Barrett Carter. Doesn't have the expectation and the workload thrown at him that Demetrius Knight Jr. has, but I thought Barrett Carter really had a good game last night. And then also Tyson Anderson, right? Tyson Anderson's been one of my favorite players on this roster for it feels like a long time now. Special teams ace, right? Really has never gotten an opportunity to play safety in a regular season game based on injuries and based on Lou Anarumo just kind of sticking with the same guys back there. But he had an interception last night. Granted, it was a horrible throw. I forget who was in at quarterback for the Commanders at that point, but it was a nice job. A little, toe drag swag down by the sideline. He was able to haul it in. Nice play by Anderson. And, that's another position where you're kind of evaluating right now, like, okay, do you need to bring in an outside player that isn't currently on your roster? Tyson Anderson showed some good things there, and obviously we know about the struggles of Geno Stone last year. He's got the hamstring now. Jordan Battle has kind of been it might come to a point where you need to throw Tyson Anderson out there as a safety that is starting for you, and I don't think that necessarily is the worst thing in the world because I was really impressed with what I saw from Tyson Anderson last night in the football game, and he's just a guy that competes. He's a feisty guy, he's a physical guy, and he's a super athletic guy as well, and he certainly had a good football game on Monday night. But that will do it for this edition of Chatterbox Bengals. Cincinnati wins the game, and again, kind of to reiterate what I said right off the top, kind of feels like an important preseason win, despite the fact it means nothing, right? You kind of went into this preseason saying you're attacking it from a whole different angle, playing your starters, and you get rewarded with a victory. And ultimately, the Bengals will have one more preseason game before it is time to rock in Cleveland in Week 1. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up icon if you have made it to the end of today's show. We certainly appreciate you. Show your appreciation for us by liking today's video for me right now.